Hi, friends. It's your girl Harpo. Welcome to this episode of Brown Girl Guild titled Girl, Don't Be Petty. Now, this season at Brown Girl Guild, we're exploring what it means to truly love yourself. And something that I've been saying in the most recent episodes is that truly loving yourself means also looking in the mirror and recognizing that sometimes the one creating drama and chaos in your life is your own damn self. Yes, we can sit here and shower ourselves with positive affirmations and really love ourselves and wrap ourselves up in this warm blanket of just happiness and joy and just full admiration for ourselves. But self love is also looking in the mirror and recognizing that, yeah, sometimes you're the one that creates drama and chaos in your life, bro. And when that happens, your job is pointing at those parts in the mirror, picking up on all the bad habits, asking yourself where they're all coming from, and then holding yourself accountable for the mess that they may have created. And the self love part, and this is important, the self love part is doing all of this with gentleness, kindness, and ease. It's granting yourself grace for all the stuff that you're doing because let's be real, we weren't really born with these bad habits, right? These are things that we learned along the way. These are learned behaviors, learned habits. And so self love is just a process of unlearning all that stuff that we do that contributes to the chaos in your life, right? It's reminding yourself that you can work on these things that are wrong in your behavior while also maintaining that there is nothing inherently wrong with you. Now, a bad habit and something that contributes to a lot of the chaos in my life is my habit of being petty. I love being petty, you know? Being petty is something that I'm so good at. I'm just so good at making petty little comments, making petty little actions, and just being petty overall. And I recognize that being petty contributes to a lot of chaos in my life. It is a form of misalignment. It's something that I do that I don't really want to do. And it makes me, it ends up making me treat people in a way that I don't really want to treat them. It also takes up a lot of energy in my life because being petty, as we're going to find out in just a second when we start to kind of go through what it actually means to be petty and what the word petty even is, being petty takes up so much energy. It takes up so much energy in your life, in your space, and you get distracted because you could be doing far more productive things, but then you're sitting there being petty all the time. And then you're just being an auntie in training, in my opinion. Being petty is being an auntie in training, straight up. And I want to talk about being an auntie in training in just a second as well, because I think that it's a very important point and a very important part of the puzzle when it comes to my bad habit of being petty. So I was really curious about what the word petty actually even means because not a lot of people understand what being petty is, right? The word petty is not necessarily a part of everybody's vocabulary. But lucky for you, I'm going to add it to your vocabulary. Not because I'm going to tell you and then you're going to go be petty, but I'm going to tell you and then you're going to realize, oh my God, this is what being petty is. I'm not going to be petty because Harpo says we shouldn't be petty. And I mean, whatever. If you want to be petty, you can be petty. I'm not trying to be a preacher or a teacher. But anyway, the definition of the word petty is something of little importance, something that is trivial. And synonyms for the word petty are minor and insignificant and probably meaningless. And the word petty actually comes from a French word that we all kind of really know, and it's petite. And over time, the word petty, or petite, I guess in French, has evolved to become something that is insulting, right? It's a very belittling insult. Calling somebody petty is insulting. You're kind of throwing a little bit of shade at someone when you're saying, oh, so and so is so petty. And it says that it refers to issues of small importance, or honestly, in this case, small minded people, right? And that's why it feels so harsh to be called petty, or it stings when you're called petty because it's, I guess it's suggesting that you might be a small minded person. Now, the most interesting definition of petty that I saw when I was kind of, putting this episode together was something that the New York Times Magazine suggests about being petty. So it says in an article about pettiness, it says, pettiness often manifests itself as an outsized form of revenge, responding to mild slights by putting an absurd amount of energy into plotting meaningless reprisals. And I love that. I love the way that the New York Times Magazine has conceptualized pettiness because it says that it's an outsized form of revenge to be petty, right? And I've never thought of it like that. Like being petty is something that we do to hurt somebody when they've hurt us, or kind of like sting somebody after they've done something that has made us uncomfortable. And even the part where it says putting an absurd amount of energy into plotting meaningless reprisals, that is so true. Being petty requires so much freaking energy. Again, an absurd amount of energy. And for what, right? To plot meaningless reprisals, like literally to plot meaningless revenge. And so, again, being petty takes up so much time in your life and time away from you actually doing things that are productive and like really, supportive of your growth and supportive of the kind of person you are. But here we are marinating in our own marinating in our own pettiness and just being upset about something that, Falana said or Falana said that. Like we just sit there, we marinate in it. And that is something that I've done. And I'm so excited to kind of go through my relationship with being petty in this episode because I'm done. I am done. I don't want to be petty anymore. It takes too much energy. Now, okay, so if we're going to conceptualize pettiness, I want to give some examples of petty behaviors that we see often. My favorite example of a petty behavior, subtweeting. We've all seen it be done or we understand the idea of a subtweet. And if you don't, I'm going to break it down for you right now. Subtweeting is something that Twitter users do when they want to talk about so and so, or they want to refer to something so and so said without actually directly speaking to so and so. So, subtweeting is when, I can go on Twitter and I can type out a tweet about someone or in direct reference to something, but not actually tag the person, right? Not actually mention who I'm talking about. And honestly, being petty is just kind of like the real life physical form of subtweeting. It's when we're kind of getting back at someone or we're reacting to something that happened to us without actually going to the root cause of it. And petty behavior is, not just something that is for Twitter. I mean, if we look at brown Twitter, it's pettiness all over, really. But pettiness is something that we also do when we are posting to Instagram stories or posting to our Snapchat stories just so that one person can see, right? We want so and so to see us having such a lovely time. We're doing so great without them. I don't need you. I'm good. When we're doing all those behaviors, we're being petty because, again, if we're going to take the definition of the New York Times Magazine, we're putting an absurd amount of energy into a sort of revenge, to a sort of like getting back at someone to show them, like, ha, I'm good. I'm Gucci. I'm doing so good without you. But really, like, we're not. Because if we were really doing that well and we were really doing that good, first of all, we wouldn't be subtweeting. First of all, we wouldn't be really posting to Instagram. So petty behaviors are things that we do all the time. It's around us all the time. And again, like I said in the beginning, for a long time, I was being petty, right? I loved being petty. I marinated in it. It brought me so much joy because if I peel back the layer, it's not that I enjoyed revenge. I in a way enjoyed that the person that hurt me was getting a taste of the hurt, right? Not because I'm, a sociopath and I like hurting people, but when you're hurting, the first thing that most of us want to do is get rid of the hurt, right? We want to transfer it. We want to give it away. And so for me, being petty was a form of transferring my hurt and kind of giving it back to the person that gave it to me, right? And so there were so many things that I would do all the time that were super, super petty in nature. I would, again, do all of those things. I would subtweet, I would post on Instagram, or I would go out of my way to like bring people up in conversations, right? Like if I was having a conversation with somebody, I wanted so badly to insert someone who had done me wrong. I would kind of like formulate the conversation or sort of like navigate the conversation in a certain direction so that I was able to like bring a person up to just so I could share with this other person that I was speaking to the experience that I've had. And another form of pettiness that I have very much adopted and marinated in is a lack of communication. So, I've always kind of bottled things in and I've just let people say what they want to say and then do what they want to do. And instead of actually telling them truthfully how I felt or how, their actions or their words made me feel, the bottling up has actually created a sense of pettiness in my communication when I speak to them. Instead of just addressing the root cause of the problem, I have reacted in very petty ways by doing things and saying things that were super like small and like super mediocre and didn't actually necessarily need to be like brought up or mentioned in conversation, you know? So for me, pettiness has been like a reoccurring pattern and something that, like I mentioned, I'm done doing because there's so much going on there. There's so much misalignment, bottling up, behaving in absurd ways and then hurting myself and hurting other people in the process. And I just don't want to freaking do that anymore. So, I really want to talk about the roots of pettiness for me, right? I want to talk about where this learned behavior of pettiness has come for me. And perhaps some of you who are listening might be able to really relate to this. So, I said something earlier about pettiness being a form of like auntie training, right? Like, if you're being petty, it's a form of being an auntie in training. And honestly, if you're listening to this, it might be an uncle in training as well. But I like to use the example of aunties. So for me, I grew up watching the women around me be incredibly petty, like straight up. I'm not going to hide that. I saw so many women in my life being so petty to one another. And I think it's like uniquely characteristic of cultures like the South Asian culture sometimes. And there's examples of this all the time around us, whether it's in our families or it's in social media, like pop culture, all the drama our moms watch. There's always this weird, fierce competition between women and this harshness and this lack of camaraderie around women sometimes that we grow up in, right? If you watch any of the drama, what's the main like what's the very common plot that we see repeat itself over and over again? There's always this like one evil auntie in the natak who is constantly being petty, is constantly plotting revenge and constantly making everybody's life incredibly difficult. And for me, I also saw like remnants of that in my real life, the way that the relationship dynamic is between my mom and my grandma, the way that the relationship dynamic is between my mother and some of my aunts, the relationship dynamic between some of my, other extended relatives, women relatives, female relatives, the way that they all treat each other and the way that they speak to one another has always been incredibly harsh and it's been rooted in pettiness, right? I think there's been a lack of responsiveness and more of a reactiveness. And so everything has always come from a place of, really making big, really trivial things, right? And not necessarily meeting one another with compassion and understanding and letting small things go. And so this was a learned behavior. I saw so many people in my life being petty to one another. And I mean, I want to extend it beyond just women too. There's this hilarious tweet that I see all the time of, how sometimes our parents will tell us not to trust our friends and trust people, but meanwhile, they're in like a land dispute with their brother, or meanwhile, they're in like a land dispute with their cousins. And I think even the way that so much of the relatives in our families kind of communicate with one another. And again, I'm not suggesting that this is the case for everybody across the board. Families are incredibly different and diverse. And so by no means am I suggesting that this is the case across the board. But for me, growing up, I saw most of the adults in my life adopt really petty behavior and act in really, really petty ways. And so I became petty. I mean, and that's not like to say that, it's just something that happened and I had no control over it. I became petty because I saw petty. And where I'm at currently today is I don't want to be petty anymore. I just don't want to, even though it's been learned behavior, I would really like to unlearn it. But pettiness is something that I saw a lot growing up. And so, examples of me being petty are abundant because that's kind of how I saw conflict mitigation. That's how I saw people resolve conflict. Actually, resolve would be an incredibly inaccurate word to use. No conflict ever got resolved because everybody was too busy being petty and plotting revenge all the time. And so being petty is something that I think that has just manifested itself and just kind of shown up in various forms of my relationships. And sometimes I'm petty to even the people that I love the most in life because that's just the way that I've been conditioned to handle a problem. And the thing about being petty, right? And, it kind of, I want to pull this thread of revenge and just take it all the way out. Pettiness is vindicative, right? For me, I feel like I've been incredibly vindicative when I'm being petty. when really I should just be open and honest with both myself and others. I mentioned a little while ago that, for me, pettiness shows up mostly when I'm bottling up my emotions and I'm bottling up how I truly feel about something. Someone has said something to me or they've done something to me or they haven't honored a commitment or they've been disrespectful, they've, crossed a line or a boundary. And instead of vocalizing it in that moment, what I've done is shrunk myself, silenced myself, but kept stock of it, right? Like put it somewhere deep in my heart and just let it fester. And over time, I keep doing that. And so things keep festering, they keep building up. And then I act petty when I blow up, right? Or I will do little things of acting out and little forms of self soothing by being petty. And for me, pettiness has been a form of self soothing because, I hate shrinking myself. I know it doesn't work for me, but I do it anyway. And so for me, I think if I think about what would combat the pettiness, combating the pettiness is actually just being truthful, right? Like embracing the truth, embracing the honesty, really using my throat chakra, for those of us who don't know what the chakras are, the throat chakra, which, really is our voice, not even like our physical voice, but like, our metaphorical voice, where our truth comes from, where our communication comes from, where we can really gauge if we're living our life in full alignment with our truth and our honesty, whether, we are saying what we truly feel at the core of our body, whether we're listening to our intuition. It all comes from our throat chakra. And for me, if I had just opened up and been honest about how I was feeling or how this person had made me feel, maybe I wouldn't be acting so petty. Maybe I wouldn't feel the need to pour absurd amounts of energy into being petty and plotting little revenge, and thinking through like, how can I make this person feel bad today? Because if I really step back and think about how much energy it actually takes to put somebody down, how much energy it actually takes to go out of my way to be hurtful to somebody or to make comments or to type out a freaking subtweet, right? Like, I never want to be caught in the embarrassment of a subtweet ever, ever again. I'll share an example of something that I did that was incredibly petty once. Years ago, there was someone in my life who used to send a lot of Snapchats about their workouts, and they would Snapchat themselves at the gym all the time. And I one day decided that enough was enough. I was so sick and tired of receiving Snapchats from this person at the gym. And I didn't care that that this person was at the gym. So instead of directly dealing with the person, I did what most people do, which is again, subtweet. So I went on Twitter and I said, "Do you go to the gym for yourself or for your Snapchat?" Okay. And this person screenshot the tweet, sent it to me, and said, "You know what? Next time you should have just at me." And I remember at the time so fiercely defending myself, right? So fiercely being like, "No, no, no, it's not about you. Like, it's about somebody else. Like, I love your tweets." All of that is so messy and so incredibly embarrassing. First of all, why do you care so much if someone is Snapchatting the gym, right? Realistically, I was insecure and I wasn't feeling good about the fact that I wasn't in the gym and this person had the conviction and the dedication to go to the gym every day and really take care of themselves. So that's what the real problem was. Every time I received a Snapchat from this person, it was a reminder that I wasn't in the gym and they were. Right. Second of all, if that was the case, right, if that's how I truly felt, all I could have done is simply set a boundary and deleted this person on Snapchat, right? If obviously this person wasn't that important in my life, if their content was bugging me, I could have just deleted them, right? Or I could have just, really been compassionate and sent them a message and said, "Hey, like, seeing your gym Snapchats like really triggers something inside of me. And, it's not your fault, but I just don't like receiving your Snapchats because it reminds me of my lack of initiative towards my health. And there is no way in hell that I had that much awareness at that time in my life. So there was no way that I was going to say that anyway. But I could have done that, right? And the last thing that I could have done is, I don't know, Harpo, maybe you should have just kept your freaking mouth shut and not used your Twitter fingers as trigger fingers, right? I could have just not tweeted that and lived my entire life in bliss and not made this person feel bad because, of course, mentally, subconsciously, I knew that this person was going to see this tweet, right? They followed me on Twitter. I followed them. Of course, they knew that I send Harpo gym workout Snapchats and this could very well be about me. And then I think the most embarrassing part of all out of all of this is how I sold myself out when this person actually did end up texting me and asking me if that tweet was about them. If I had the courage and the balls to like literally tweet that out, then I should have had the courage to stand by what I tweeted, which was, yeah, it is about you. I shouldn't have said, no, it's not about you. Like, ha ha ha. Like, it's about somebody else. I shouldn't have freaking done that. Like, that's such a sellout thing to do. You know what I mean? And so all of that goes back to being petty, right? And again, something that, I want to reiterate is that that entire thing, that entire example, and that entire situation was about me the whole time. It actually had nothing to do with the person who was just celebrating themselves, who was celebrating their wins. And fast forward to like 5 or 6 years later, every time I go to the gym, every time I have a personal trainer, every time I'm at a yoga class, I post it on Instagram, right? Because now I understand how good it feels and how I want to actually motivate other people and how I want to show other people how fun and exciting and celebratory it can actually be to put your body first. And so, in the words of Michael Scott, my, how the turntables, right? And I think I that's why I want to stop being petty, because being petty is never about the other person. It's always about me. It's always about my relationship with me and my truth and how I'm really embracing my honesty and how I might not be embracing my honesty, how I'm shrinking myself, making myself small. It's never about the other person, right? It's an insane, absurd amount of energy. Whose energy? Mine, right? My energy. It's not anybody else's energy. Anyway, being petty is something that I don't want to do anymore. And so, if you ever catch me subtweeting, I want you to take a screenshot of the subtweet and I want you to text it to me and tell me straight up, Harpo, you're being a KJ. Now, that's on you to figure out what a KJ means. I'm not going to say it in this episode because there are a bunch that listen to this episode, but you know what I mean.